history is going somewhere. History has a purpose.
And Dr. Tony Evans says part of that purpose is to get people excited about the coming day when Christ rules the earth.
Our job now is to model the kingdom. We can't make the kingdom, but we can model the kingdom.
This is The Alternative with Dr. Tony Evans, author, speaker, senior pastor of Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship in Dallas, Texas, and president of the Urban Alternative. As believers, Christ rules our hearts. But today, Dr. Evans will talk about a time in the future when the Bible tells us Jesus will physically rule the earth. Let's join him as he tells us more about it.
So let's start there in Revelation chapter 19, the marriage supper of the Lamb. That is, when the bride, the church, gathers with the bridegroom, Jesus Christ, to celebrate the union of this relationship where the bride and the bridegroom will physically as well as spiritually be together. Revelation 19 says, "Let us rejoice and be glad and give the glory to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his bride has made herself ready." Now, how have we made ourselves ready? Well, he says, "And it was given to her to clothe herself in fine linen, bright and clean, for the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints." Jesus Christ, as he enters into the golden era, is going to make sure everything is perfect for his bride, because all of us who know Christ will be gathered with him, and we will be given clothing. He says this clothing is the righteous acts of the saints. Now, what does he mean? Well, remember, there will be the judgment seat of Christ when all the things that were inappropriate in our Christian lives will be removed, so that as we go into the golden age, only the righteous acts will continue with us. All of the dross will be burned away, the judgment by fire that 1 Corinthians 3 talks about, so that the bride, the church of Jesus Christ, will be glorious and perfect in every detail. So it's a wedding analogy. Blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, these are true words of God. Blessed because you are part of the church, part of the body of Christ. You're part of the bride, and you are part of this supper. A bride gets married. She gathers to her mate. They make the commitment, and then they go to the reception. Okay? The reception is basically a party. It's a party where people gather together to congratulate them. The guests are gathered together to celebrate the union. Now, let's look at four things. Number one, the purpose of Christ's millennial reign. Why is he going to have this special 1,000-year wedding reception, marriage supper of the Lamb, instead of just going into eternity? Because God created man to rule the earth on his behalf as a response, if you remember our spiritual warfare series, to the angelic conflict. In case you don't, let me summarize. In the angelic conflict, Satan rebelled against God's rule when there was no man. Ezekiel 28, Isaiah 14. Satan was booted out of heaven because of his rebellion, and he was cast, or he was imprisoned on a planet called Earth. That is why when you read in Genesis 1:1, the earth was without form and void. It was void, empty, ruined. Why, if God created heaven and earth, would this one planet be ruined? Because that was Satan's cell. That was the place of judgment. He was kicked out of heaven, kicked to earth, and the earth became cursed, if you will. But then God said, I am going to demonstrate to the angels my glory by creating someone less than the angels, man, a little lower than the angels, who I am going to honor in such a way that they will rule on my behalf. It is where man will realize his destiny because of the person and work of the man, Jesus Christ. So the purpose of the millennial reign is for earth to finally be under a man and under men to achieve the purpose for which it was created in the first place, to demonstrate to the angels what God can do when man operates according to his will and according to his word. So, let's look at the process. Turn back with me to Revelation chapter 19. We have the prophecy of the marriage supper, which is basically a 1,000-year reception, where Jesus Christ with his saints are going to celebrate man, finally living as man was meant to live when he was created. So we've all gathered, we've got the beautiful clothes on, it's now for the reception, and then John looks up in verse 11 and says, and then I saw heaven open. He sees heaven open, behold a white horse, and he who sat upon it called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and wages war. And his eyes are a flame of fire. Upon his head are many crowns, and he has a name written on him which no man knows except himself, clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And the armies which are in heaven, that's you and me, clothed in fine linen, which we got back in verse 8, white and clean, were following him on white horses. So why are we? Now, this has got to be a sight. Heaven opens up. Jesus Christ breaks through with his huge army, which includes you and me. Why are we coming with him? Because no bridegroom is going to a reception without his bride, and we are coming to rule with him, as we'll see as we go along. But in order for Jesus to do this, to inaugurate this 1,000-year rule, he must now deal with all of his enemies. So Jesus' first task will be judgment. He will judge. That's why it speaks of an army being with him. Verse 15. And from his mouth comes a sharp sword, so that with it he may smite the nations. And he will rule them with a rod of iron, and he treads the winepress of the fierce wrath of God. And on his robe and on his thigh he has written the name, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So he is coming, he is already king in heaven, but he's coming back to set up his kingly shop on earth. God created the heavens and earth. Jesus, by virtue of his resurrection, has now been seated on the throne in heaven. He is now returning with his church to set up his throne on earth, or his millennial reign. In order to accomplish this, as I said, he must now rid himself of all opposition. On earth, there has been a period of wrath on earth called the Great Tribulation. This tribulation is the anger of God against men for rebelling against him. It will be a horrible time that the Bible, book of Revelation, describes of God's judgment. All kind of hailstones and rivers dripping in blood and all kind of revenge, if you will, by God. Hold your finger here, but turn to Matthew chapter 24, which is another exhaustive chapter on this whole period of time. Chapter 24 of the book of Matthew. Verse 21 talks about it. Says, there shall be a great tribulation, such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever shall. And unless those days be cut short, limited to the 7 years, no life would have been saved, but for the sake of the elect, those days shall be cut short. So it will be a very deep time. But now look at verse 27. For just as the lightning comes from the east and flashes even to the west, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Verse 29. But immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heaven will be shaken, and then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, which is what we just read in Revelation 19. The heavens will open. Now, we're not told what this sign is, but whatever this sign is, it's going to get your attention, because it's going to be like a strike of lightning, he says, that comes from the east to the west. Now, how does lightning come? It comes real sharp, it comes real fast, and everybody sees it. Verse 30. And all the tribes of the earth will mourn. When Jesus Christ comes back to set up his kingdom, the whole world will see it. And then verse 31, and he will send forth his angels with a great trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. Okay, so the point is, it's going to be a climactic event. Jesus Christ comes back and he judges the world. There's a lot to this, and I'm summarizing it here because our purpose here is to look at Jesus Christ. In Acts 1:11, Jesus told his disciples that he was going to come back just as they had seen him go. How had they seen him go? On a cloud, visible and physical. How will he come back? Same way. He will be visible, he will be physical, and he will have a literal return. Okay? Revelation chapter 1 verse 7 speaks of this event as well, and it says, behold, he is coming with the clouds, because that's how he left. And every eye will see him, even those who pierced him. In chapter 20, he introduces us to this millennial reign. He says, and I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the keys of the abyss and the great chain in his hand. He laid hold of the dragon, the serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan. He's talking about giving him all of his names. Okay, and bound him for how long? 1,000 years. That's why it will be a golden age. There will be no devil.
Dr. Evans will come back with more on what it'll be like when Christ physically rules the earth. First, though, today's lesson is the last in Tony's classic series, The Uniqueness of Christ. But we'd like to send you all 10 CDs in this collection to study in depth. Each message contains additional material we didn't have time to bring you on the air, and they're yours as our thank you gift when you help us keep Tony's teaching on this station with a contribution of any amount, large or small. Along with it, we'll include a special bonus, Tony's Like No Other Bible Study Leaders Kit. It includes a DVD introduction by Tony for each of the 8 sessions, the study guide, leaders' resources, and much more. And we'll send both with our thanks for any contribution God leads you to make. But this special double offer ends today, so there's no more time to wait. Visit tonyevans.org today to make the arrangements, or call us at 1-800-800-3222, where members of our resource team are available day and night to help you. That's 1-800-800-3222. Right now, let's get back to today's message. Here's Dr. Evans.
Okay, what now next is the pattern of Christ's millennial reign. First of all, it will be a theocratic rule. No democracy, no votes. He will run it like a dictator. Okay? It will be a theocratic rule. Daniel chapter 7, verses 13 to 14 describes he will have total dominion, total power during this time. Psalm chapter 2, verse 6 says that he will rule. Chapter 19, we just saw he will be King of kings. Zechariah chapter 14, verse 9 says he will be king of the whole earth. Okay? He is going to do what the first Adam was to do. He's going to be king. And he's going to be a dictator king. Everything will conform to him during this golden age, during this age of near perfection. Notice I didn't say perfection, and the reason it's not a perfect era, because you still have human beings living on earth. So it will be a theocratic rule, and he will rule, we saw, with a rod of iron. Chapter 19, verse 15 says, what is a rod of iron? A rod of iron means there will be no toleration at no time for any rebellion against Jesus Christ or his law. The only rebellion you can have is internal. There will be no allowances for external rebellion. So you will have no crime. It'll be a golden era because he will rule with a rod of iron, or to put it a nice way, he's taking no stuff. It's going to be prosperity like you've never known it before. Look at Isaiah chapter 30. Verse 23 and 24. And he will give you rain for the seed, which you will sow in the ground, and bread from the yield of the ground, and it will be rich and plenteous. And on that day your livestock will graze in roomy pastures. Also the oxen and the donkeys which work the ground will eat salted fodder, and has been winnowed with shovel and fork. Look at chapter 35, verse 7. And the scorched land will become a pool, and the thirsty ground springs of water. In the haunt of jackals, its resting place, grass becomes reeds and bushes. Grass will grow so vibrantly and so fertily. There will be high productivity, the land will produce, and there will be health like you've never known it before. Isaiah chapter 29, verse 18. And on that day, the deaf shall hear words of a book. People who couldn't hear, if you would read to them, will now be able to hear. And out of their gloom and darkness, the eyes of the blind shall see in that day. Chapter 33, verse 24. And no resident will say, I am sick. The people who dwell there will be forgiven of their iniquity. No illness whatsoever. Chapter 35, verse 5. Then the eyes of the blind will be opened, and the ears of the deaf will be unstopped. Then the lame will leap like a deer, and the tongue of the dumb will shout for joy. Well, this couldn't be talking about us because we've already been taken care of. We've already experienced our deliverance. We're in perfect bodies. This is talking about the people who are living. All illnesses will be corrected immediately, so that in this golden age, when earth returns to its original purpose, God himself will make sure it operates properly. Let me see if I have one other passage here. Isaiah 65, verse 20. You ought to like this. No longer will there be in it an infant who lives but a few days. Okay? That means you got a baby being born. Well, remember, for those of us who have already gone to heaven, there is no marriage, neither is anyone given in marriage. So the church, Christians, we're not having babies. It's the people who went in from the tribulation, the sheep, who are now having kids. But when they have kids in this golden era, there'll be no crib deaths. There'll be nobody dying as babies. It says, or an old man who does not live out his days. An old man will live out his days. For the youth will die at the age of 100. So we don't die, right? We're already in heaven. We can't die. It's talking about human beings who are still living on earth during this golden age. He says, if you die at 100, you're still a baby. Right? Animals can't kill you, right? Nobody can rob you and destroy you, because it's the golden age that's being run by a rod of iron. They shall build houses and inhabit them. See, so people are living regular kind of lives. All right? And they shall plant vineyards and eat the fruit. They shall not build, verse 22, and another inhabit. In other words, nobody's going to be able to take what's yours in this golden age. How is Jesus going to run this program? He's sitting in the capital, which is over in Israel, Middle East. How's he going to administrate this? Because he's still only one place at a time, because he's still a man. How's he administrating this? Well, enter you and me. The church will serve as Jesus' government. We are the ones who will be appointed to govern the earth under his dictatorship during the golden years or millennial reign. That's why you have the judgment during the 7 years. Remember, Jesus said that he would give some 5 cities, give some 10 cities. Remember those rewards? Well, this is where those rewards apply to. Your faithfulness now determines your appointment then. Okay? So we are going to rule with him and be appointed with him some, and it's based on your faithfulness to Jesus Christ. All right. Let's close now with the conclusion of the millennium. Okay? Turn back to Revelation. Okay? The 1,000 years is coming to an end. Revelation chapter 20. Okay? Verse 7. And when the 1,000 years are completed, verse 7 says, Satan will be released from his prison and will come out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, that is the whole world, Gog and Magog, to gather them together for war. The number of them is like the sands of the seashore. In other words, in 1,000 years, when people are having babies and having babies and having babies and nobody dying, that's a lot of people. Okay? So the whole earth, there may be a small group that go in the millennium, but at the end of this 1,000 years, with all these families reduplicating and nobody dying, okay, or if you die at 100, you're still a baby, then that means you've got masses of people who have now repopulated the earth at a staggering rate. When Satan is released, God is now going to let Satan, catch this now, bring on the outside what people have been holding on the inside. Okay? In other words, folks have been wanting to rebel against God, but too scared. Folks have been wanting to rebel against God, but they know he's going to speak the word, snuff them out, so they don't want that. But Satan will now be freed up to let men bring on the outside their feelings about Jesus Christ and God that's on the inside. All right? And it's going to be a huge rebellion. Verse 9. And they came up on the broad plain of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and beloved city. Well, beloved city is what? Jerusalem. All right? So they surround the beloved city. Well, this is not going to be much of a fight. Look at the last line in verse 9. And fire came down from heaven and devoured them. Oops. Wrong decision. And the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire. Verses 11 to 15 says, and the people who joined him are judged. It's called the great white throne judgment. Verse 11, they are cast into the lake of fire. Verses 14 and 15. And now you get to eternity. See, you wanted to skip the 1,000 years and just get to eternity. No, you can't skip the reason why man was made it. Verse 21 says, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth. Now you into eternity. It is the New Jerusalem. It is a heavenly city that will come down. It sounds like Star Wars, doesn't it? That will come down out of heaven and dwell among men, where Jesus Christ, verse 4, he will wipe away every tear from their eye. No longer any death, no longer any mourning, no longer any crying, no longer any pain. The first things have passed away, and he who sits on the throne, behold, I am making all things new.
Dr. Evans will be back with some final thoughts about putting today's lesson into action as he wraps up our current series, The Uniqueness of Christ. Remember, if you contact us before the end of the day, we'll send you this entire 10-message set on CD as our way of saying thanks for your donation of any amount to help keep the alternative coming your way each day. And it'll come to you with that special bonus, the Like No Other Bible Study, DVD, and Leader's Guide. Contact us right away before time runs out. You can do that online at tonyevans.org or by calling 1-800-800-3222, where staff members are always waiting to help with your resource requests. Again, 1-800-800-3222. On Monday, we'll hear the first in a collection of messages covering some key principles of the Christian life. We call it the Spiritual Toolkit. You won't want to miss it. Right now, though, here's Dr. Evans again with some final suggestions we should keep in mind.
What is the point of this? It is simply history is going somewhere. You don't just flop off of history. History has a purpose. Man will rule. Our job now is to model the kingdom. We can't make the kingdom, but we can model the kingdom. Thy kingdom come. In light of the fact we know what it's going to be like, let's set up some replicas right now to make people want it. 2, prepare for the kingdom. If you want a high post then, you got to live a high life now. Thirdly, honor the king of the kingdom. Live a life that says, Lord, I want to honor Jesus Christ and give you praise to the glory of your grace. Prioritize the kingdom. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you.
The Alternative with Dr. Tony Evans is brought to you by the Urban Alternative and is made possible by the generous contributions of listeners like you.